There is a saying in the military: lead, follow, or get the hell out of the way. Most people think that's just a cool slogan. For George S. Patton, it was a religion. Imagine a guy who thought he was a reincarnated Roman legionnaire, a guy who polished his helmet until it shined like a mirror so his enemies could see him coming. A guy who carried 2 revolvers with ivory handles, not pearl, he hated pearl, on his hips like a cowboy. He was loud, he was rude, he swore in every sentence, and he was absolute poison to the politicians in Washington. By 1944, half the US government wanted to fire him. They thought he was a liability. They thought he was crazy, but they couldn't fire him. Why? Because across the ocean in Berlin, Adolf Hitler was looking at a map of Europe, sweating bullets, and asking his generals one question over and over again: where is Patton? They couldn't fire him because he was the only guy who knew how to win the ugly fights. This is the story of the man who dragged the Allies to victory, kicking and screaming. Welcome to Valor and Heritage. George Smith Patton Jr. wasn't made for the 20th century. He was born rich in California, but he didn't care about money. He cared about glory. He read history books like they were instruction manuals. He truly believed he had fought in the Trojan War, faced Caesar in Gaul, and marched with Napoleon. He told his staff, "I have been here before." And honestly, after you saw him fight, you started to believe him. When World War II kicked off, America needed a tank commander. Tanks were new. They were fast, dangerous, and loud. Patton was perfect. He treated tank warfare like a cavalry charge. Attack, attack, attack. He didn't believe in digging foxholes. He said, if you dig a hole, you're just digging your own grave. He wanted his men moving forward, always. He proved himself in North Africa. The American army had just gotten their butts kicked by the Germans at Kasserine Pass. Morale was garbage. Patton showed up and instantly changed everything. He made the soldiers wear their neckties in the middle of the desert. He fined them if they looked sloppy. The soldiers hated him for it. They called him old blood and guts, and they'd say, "Yeah, our blood and his guts." But you know what? They started winning. They started acting like soldiers. But Patton had a dark side. He had zero patience for weakness. In Sicily, 1943, he was touring a medical tent. He saw a soldier sitting on a bed, shaking. The soldier didn't have a physical wound. He had battle fatigue, what we call PTSD today. Patton snapped. He called the soldier a coward. He slapped him across the face with his gloves. He threatened to shoot him. The news of the slapping incident hit the newspapers back home. The public was divided. Some said, that's abuse. Others said, that's tough love. But General Eisenhower, the big boss, was furious. He almost fired him right there. Instead, he put him in the penalty box. For months, while the other generals were planning the invasion of D-Day, Patton was sitting on a bench in England, bored out of his mind, guarding a fake army. But here is where the story gets hilarious. Eisenhower used Patton's reputation as a weapon. The Germans knew Patton was in England. They assumed that wherever Patton was, that's where the invasion would happen. So the Allies built a ghost army. They created a fake army group called FUSAC. They built inflatable rubber tanks. They made fake radio calls. They let German spies see Patton driving around near the coast of Dover, looking across the water at Calais. Hitler bought it hook, line, and sinker. He kept his best tank divisions waiting at Calais for Patton, convinced that the D-Day landings at Normandy were just a distraction. Even weeks after D-Day, while American troops were fighting and dying on the beaches of Normandy, Hitler refused to move his reserves because he was still waiting for Patton. Patton essentially defeated a German army without firing a shot, just by being scary. Finally, in July 1944, Eisenhower unleashed the beast. Patton was given command of the Third Army and sent to France. And oh boy, was he ready. It was like letting a pit bull off a chain. The breakout was called Operation Cobra. While the British and other American units were fighting for every inch of hedgerows, Patton punched a hole in the line and just drove. He moved so fast that the maps couldn't keep up. He was capturing towns that weren't even on the schedule for next week. His supply trucks were blowing out tires trying to chase him with gasoline. He famously ordered his men to bypass resistance. "Don't fight them," he'd say. "Just hold them by the nose and kick him in the pants." He was encircling hundreds of thousands of Germans. It was the Blitzkrieg, but American style. We are heading into the Battle of the Bulge, the coldest and deadliest fight of the war. But before we freeze in the snow, I have a mission for you. If you love these stories of American grit, deploy that like button and subscribe to the channel. We are building an army of history lovers here. Join the ranks. Now, grab your winter coat. We're going to Bastogne. December 1944. The war was supposed to be over by Christmas. Everyone relaxed. And then Hitler played his final card. He launched a massive surprise attack through the Ardennes forest. It was the Battle of the Bulge. The Germans smashed into the American lines, creating a huge bulge in the map. In the middle of that bulge was a town called Bastogne, where the 101st Airborne, the Band of Brothers guys, were trapped. They were surrounded, freezing, and running out of ammo. All the Allied generals met in a panic at Verdun. Eisenhower asked, who can go help them? Everyone looked at their shoes. Patton's Third Army was fighting 100 miles away, facing the wrong direction. To help Bastogne, Patton would have to pull his entire army out of combat, turn them 90 degrees, march them 100 miles through a blizzard, and attack immediately. It was a logistical nightmare. It was impossible. Eisenhower asked Patton, "George, how long will it take you to turn your army?" Patton took a puff of his cigar and said, "I could attack with 3 divisions in 48 hours." The room went silent. The other generals laughed. They said, "George, you're full of it." But Patton wasn't bluffing. He had already told his staff to start packing before he even walked into the meeting. The march to Bastogne is legendary. It was freezing cold. The roads were ice, but Patton drove his men relentlessly. He was everywhere, yelling, encouraging, pushing. Faster, faster, people are dying. But there was one problem he couldn't shoot: the weather. The snow was so bad that American planes couldn't fly. Without air support, the tanks were blind. So Patton did the most Patton thing ever. He ordered his chaplain to write a prayer for good weather. He literally printed 250,000 copies of this prayer and gave one to every soldier. It said, "Almighty and most merciful Father, grant us fair weather for battle." And you know what? The next day, the clouds broke. The sun came out. The P-47 Thunderbolts roared into the sky. Patton walked outside, looked at the sun, and smiled. God had joined the Third Army. Patton smashed through the German lines and saved Bastogne. He didn't stop there. He raced across the Rhine River and into Germany. He wanted to go all the way to Berlin. He wanted to keep going and fight the Russians, which, in hindsight, might have saved us the Cold War. But the politicians told him to stop. The war in Europe ended in May 1945, and for Patton, that was a tragedy. He was a warrior who had run out of wars. He famously said, "I love it. God help me, I do love it so. I love it more than my life." Sadly, the man who survived machine gun fire, tank shells, and shrapnel died in a freak car accident just months after the war ended. His Cadillac crashed into a truck at low speed. He broke his neck. He died in a hospital bed in Heidelberg, paralyzed. It wasn't the glorious death he wanted. He whispered to his wife, "This is a hell of a way to die." But maybe it was the only way. Men like Patton are like fire. They're essential when it's dark and cold and you're surrounded by wolves. But when the sun comes up and peace returns, that fire can burn the house down. He was a man built for the storm, not the calm. He was buried in Luxembourg, right alongside his men. He didn't want to be buried in Arlington with the big shots. He wanted to lie with the boys from the Third Army. Today, we remember him because he wasn't polite or because he was a nice guy. He wasn't. We remember him because when the world was threatened by true evil, George C. Patton stepped into the arena and punched it in the mouth. He taught us that victory doesn't go to the timid, it goes to the bold. If you enjoyed this ride with the General, leave a comment below. Was Patton right about pushing on to Russia? Next time on Valor and Heritage, we're heading way back. We're going to the frontier to meet a man who wore a coonskin cap and died defending a small mission in Texas. You know the name, you know the place. Remember the Alamo. Keep your powder dry.